I'd like to introduce First Atlantic Nickel CEO Adrian Smith. The symbol of the company is FAN on the TSX Venture. Last month, I was at the Beaver Creek conference in Colorado, and I met Adrian there, and he walked me through the First Atlantic company presentation. And frankly, I was struck by a few key points. The first one is the scale of their project. This is a very large property footprint with a considerable potential strike extent, 30 kilometers. So the scale, is enormous. And when you start talking about that kind of strike extent, you could get up to, ore bodies in the billion ton range potentially. Another thing is Awaruite. So the nickel market is a little opaque. It's not necessarily very well understood by many investors. It's been out of favor for the last couple of years. And Awaruite is definitely not well understood. I mean, I've been around for a while. I've been at this game for a couple decades, and I didn't even really understand it. I don't understand why this kind of nickel is different from sulfide or laterite deposits. So I learned a lot from him, speaking with him at Beaver Creek, and I became very interested in the company. Well, today they announced they have started a drill program at their project in Newfoundland. So, welcome, Adrian. It's a pleasure to speak to you today.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Great to be here. Thanks for having me and reconnecting after Beaver Creek. That was a great event. Like you said, nickel's a little out of favor, but we're dead set on building this large scale project out. So we're looking long term, and we're going to be ready for the wave when it comes.
All right. So First Atlantic is a relatively new company. Again, the symbol is FAN on the TSX Venture. You're the CEO. And I'm interested to hear your story. How did you get into the mining industry, and what motivated you to be the CEO of a junior mining company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a long story at this point. I started with getting my geology degree at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia here, and started working as an underground mine geologist. So right out of the gate, I was in a producing mine underground for about 4 or 5 years. Really, cut my teeth learning how the back end works when you're actually in production, building resources, actually producing resources, milling, doing grade control, everything like that. And I had really had enough of the underground scene, and 4 or 5 years in the dark underground is enough to make you want to go back into the light. So I switched over and I started doing exploration, and I started working with a group, and one of my first big projects was out in Newfoundland and Labrador, and so it's I'm really comfortable getting back in here and happy to be back out east in Eastern Canada. It's an amazing province to work in, but I started with a project where we just had a greenfield geophysical target, and within a year, I had taken over the project management, and we drilled out 7 billion tons of iron ore, because it's such a large scale, continuous style of mineralization, similar to what we're kind of targeting with FAN, that you're able to do that. And large scale step outs really kind of bring the tonnage together. And after that, I started taking over more management roles, eventually directorship roles, and then very comfortable managing these projects and pushing these greenfield projects through to the discovery phase, through to an actual resource, and that led me into the actual management and director and CEO roles, which I sit in today.
Great. So you like base metals. You like big ore bodies where when you drill, you don't need to target a 2 meter wide vein from 400 meters away. You can just drill right into the heart of the beast and
Yeah.
hit nickel over 500 or 600 meters, right?
Yeah, it's the beauty of these large scale things. Like you said, drilling a gold deposit is really drill intensive. So it takes a lot of meters to build up a resource. The beauty of something that is large scale is that it's continuous over hundreds of meters to kilometers, and your drilling can be very widely spaced. And with a couple thousand meters, you can start to put together a significant, sizable resource. And that's essentially what we're intending to do by taking those large step outs. And I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to a resource with this first phase, because this is still really the discovery phase that we're working on here. We're drilling areas that have never been drilled before. We're going after commodity that or a mineral, Awaruite, that is really kind of not that well known by the industry. So we have put together a really good technical team, including some of the most renowned experts in this style of mineralization that are helping lead the charge.
I want to talk about Awaruite, but first I want to talk about the company. How did FAN come about, and how did you guys acquire the project?
Yeah, FAN. It started out as a nickel project. We really had this focus to go after critical minerals. We see the importance of nickel. We see the importance of keeping the nickel supply domestic. And we got into a project up north near Voisey's Bay, which is one of the most significant Canadian nickel deposits ever found. For any mineral, it's one of the biggest transactions ever to happen in the Canadian mining space, and it's still wide open up there. It's very the downside is it's very remote and very difficult to work in that far north because it is quite far north. So we were essentially looking for a secondary nickel asset that we could work on year round, and that's how the Atlantic Nickel project came about. And the idea of it was really like under appreciated until we started to get into it and we realized the significant size potential. And once we started to put the land package together, it took several months to do all the transactions. There's a bunch of individual vendors and prospectors that had little pieces here, so we had to do multiple transactions to accumulate that. I think it's over 40 kilometers long. Once we started to put this package together, we saw how large this thing could be, and that was really game changing. That's really when the switch flipped, and it became the primary asset, the flagship asset. And we've seen that gain interest with majors or strategic investors, sort of say. And we've been very lucky that on the technical side, we have been getting a lot of appreciation from guys in the industry that I would say, are much smarter than me, that understand this type of deposit. And we've just kind of been running with it. So in a very short period of time, we've taken it from the conceptual phase to realization of ownership of the project, getting just to earn 100% interest in the project, making it a district scale, advancing the technical side, doing all the groundwork and field work and sampling, and now moving into the drilling. It's just been a whirlwind, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of struck by the scale of this opportunity, and that it's I'm very clearly under the radar. And the nickel market is really out of favor right now. So as a contrarian investor, somebody who understands the ebbs and flows and the cycles of the mining industry, I love the idea of getting in at the bottom of the cycle when the metal is really out of favor, with the potential for a new discovery, you know, for the potential of a junior, a tiny junior showing the world like, hey, we have an ore body that is substantial, that has scale, and that could be economic, that could potentially one day be a mine, right? And so that's what I saw when I met you in September, and when I looked into the company's flagship asset, and the drill program that has now gotten underway, right? It's like check, check, check. It checked a lot of boxes for me. So let's talk about the nickel market, this very hated metal that is actually very important to everything that we build in the world today. Obviously, it's really essential to making steel, stainless steel. Tell us what you know about the, you know, nickel market and why it got so out of favor in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean it's really one of the supply and demand cycles that we're going through here, where the supply is being flooded in from entities like Chinese, the Chinese controlling a lot of the production and smelting, and really operating in an unsustainable, you know, environmentally destructive manner. It's kind of it's hard to watch, but that's really had the overbearing influence on the market, driving the prices down. Is this the I don't want to talk too much about the things that are going on that are leading to this kind of oversupply, but it really is um, being controlled by countries like China that are practicing very cheap uh, labor camps and situations where they're destroying land and not operating in any way that the Canadian mining company or most Western companies would be able to operate. So because of that, their costs are a lot lower, but it's something that's unsustainable. Like, this isn't going to last. We have a longer term outlook. We're looking for those Western countries like the U.S. to shift the focus to onshoring or domestic supply or North American supply, and putting emphasis on sustainable, environmentally friendly practices where we can have large scale operations that are clean, that aren't polluting, no acid mine drainage, no contamination into the local water supplies. These are all things that we think are very achievable, and we could do it, very, very efficiently in Canada, and specifically in Newfoundland. So one of the unique things that we're looking at doing is trying to create a nickel supply that doesn't require smelting. So it's really a processing story. Taking that smelting away from Chinese companies, and China is a big deal. They control over 80% of the world's smelting capacity, and they're not doing it in an environmentally friendly way. So you're seeing that come into policies that are being enacted by the US government. They're putting in things like the Inflation Reduction Act that are preventing companies that are getting minerals that are now going to be processed, meaning smelted in these areas, in these countries, and they're not going to give them the credits that are going to be available to other companies that are doing and getting their vertically integrated supply chain from clean, more environmentally friendly, and domestic sources.
Yeah, so basically all the oversupply in the nickel market has been sourced in basically Southeast Asia, to just put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And pretty much all of it is processed in China or by Chinese smelters that may have operations in other countries, but it's all owned by China. Um, and so and then in North America, we don't have much smelting capacity. I mean, there's like Sudbury, and then that's pretty much it, right? And those smelters are pretty long in the tooth, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, if there were, there's some other large scale nickel projects that are getting some attention right now, but if they are a sulfide mineral, they're, especially if they're a large scale sulfide mineral, they're going to need some form of smelting processing, which we really don't have the capacity for. So that's really where this Awaruite comes in as such a unique story. Like the processing is so simple. When you walk someone through it, they just don't even believe that it's possible because it's too simple. And that's really the revolutionary thing about it is it's a very highly magnetic mineral that you can separate using magnets, the same way that they process material in large scales in the iron ore industry. So it's not the creation of a new technology; it's the adaptation of a new technology into a new space. And that's what's really going to revolutionize this industry in our minds, is that it's essentially the going from a high grade copper mine to porphyry mines. You're now, the majority of the world's copper is mined at in a bulk tonnage, a large scale, and that prior to the 1970s, that didn't happen. That doesn't happen with nickel. That's the potential that we see here. Essentially, we're looking for nickel porphyries, very large scale, very big deposits, very long lives, and a huge amount of nickel contained. And being able to process it in an efficient, environmentally friendly way is going to be game changing. That's this really revolutionizing the way that nickel is mined and processed.
Yeah, so I like the way you explained it. It's basically a porphyry, but it's not copper, it's nickel. And the cheaper and more efficient processing of the Awaruite, I'm still learning how to say the word Awaruite, is what makes the difference. So whereas typically, like with nickel, you might need an average grade of 0.5% or 0.6% for the ore body to be economic, a much smaller ore body that requires smelting. But with Awaruite, you could have half the grade, you might even be able to have 1/3 the grade, and it could be potentially economic because number one, the processing is much cheaper, it's a much simpler flow sheet, and the ore body can be much larger, like a porphyry
Yeah,
deposit, where with some smaller copper deposits like magmatic conduit hosted sulfides, the ore body might be 5 million tons. With porphyry, it's going to be 500 million tons or a billion tons, right? So the
yeah,
scale is way different. It's a whole different
yeah,
ballpark. And so the grade can be a lot lower because it's a different mining method, usually going to be open pit. And the scale, just the economies of scale make a big difference in terms of the actual per unit cost to mine that porphyry deposit. So yeah, let's talk about Awaruite and why it's so much easier to process and why this form of nickel has not really been well understood.
yeah. I mean, it's the unique properties of the mineral being very highly magnetic are really the key. So essentially, what happens, and I referenced the porphyry system. It's not a porphyry system. It's actually a system that's much larger than a porphyry system. We're looking at an ophiolite body, which is a giant section of the Earth's ocean crust that has been thrust up onto the continent. So now we have a chunk from an old ocean basin that's sitting almost subvertically in Newfoundland, and most people know that the core of the Earth is enriched in iron and nickel. Well, in the upper mantle, you still have high elevations of nickel, and that's essentially what's been preserved and thrust up onto the continent of Newfoundland, or the margin of the continent. And we're focused on areas where there's no sulfur. So having no sulfur is really a key component, and that's what makes our project unique. Is that there's other projects out there that are similar material, or mantle sourced nickel rich material, but they're in an environment where they're getting fed sulfur, and that sulfur wants to go and be bound with the nickel. So in an environment absent of sulfur, the nickel will actually go into an alloy. So we're essentially looking at little grains of stainless steel floating in a very large volume of material. And because of that, we're looking at something at a very large scale. You know, when you think about the crust of the Earth, you're not thinking about meters or tens of meters. We're talking about kilometers wide by tens of kilometers long in these preserved chunks. So I don't know if I can share my screen here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to maybe show an example of that. Maybe I'll just start with the location here, being obviously in Newfoundland, which is significant. That's a whole nother conversation about how unique Newfoundland is as an opportunity.
Yeah, you know, what are some of the advantages of being, you know, located there as opposed to like in Ontario or something?
I mean, there's many advantages. The permitting is extremely fast. The local government and the ministry there is extremely supportive, which is, you know, evident in how fast we have been able to turn around this project and get to this phase. Are waiting for permits and going through that process in the modern era, and it's kind of from BC is transitioning across all of Canada now, is taking you know, up to a year or more to be able to, once you have established what you want to do, to be able to actually be permitted and be allowed to go do it. And being in a location like Newfoundland, we also have a lot of cheap power. There's good infrastructure. There's an immense amount of hydroelectric power on the island, and you're close to the ocean, so very good for shipping. And you know, that the access to the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is just down to the south of Newfoundland, is a very strategic benefit when we're looking at the stainless steel industry as a component of the overall market for nickel. So that's a very, very large component of nickel is still processed for stainless steel that used in everyday life. And then there's this growing side with electric vehicles that, you know, there's some interesting reports out there that there were other minerals that were trying to be adapted and used. And, you know, just recently Tesla basically said they're not going to go that way. They're sticking with the nickel. It's much more efficient, you know, longer ranges, better charging speeds. So when you see, you know, Tesla is a company that leads the way. And when you see Tesla abandoning this LFP battery, for example, is a pretty significant sign that nickel is going to be here to stay, and it's going to be growing in use and in demand. And so being in Newfoundland, being close to that St. Lawrence Seaway, that gives us direct access into the US market, cutting down all kinds of costs for shipping. And especially when we don't have to be integrated into the global supply chain for processing of this mineral, of nickel, and this critical mineral, you know, that's another economic consideration that significantly cuts down the overall cost of producing nickel in a deposit like what we're looking at building. So that's, yeah, I mean, it's a great location in Newfoundland here. And then I was just going to scroll down. When we're talking about the scale, like this, you know, being part of a large chunk of very mafic ocean crust that has a high preliminary content of nickel, like this is where we need to be looking for large deposits, is where there's very large volumes of nickel rich material. So, you know, I was getting onto the point where there's no sulfur. The nickel goes into an alloy. So essentially we have a 40-kilometer long project that has a 30-kilometer very high nickel anomaly. And within that, we're seeing multiple kilometer zones where we're getting these conditions that are just right to form this nickel alloy. and that's where we're essentially moving to drill, and we're, you know, kind of leading the way in this field, and especially in Newfoundland, we're the first company to be out here looking for this, at least in the drilling phase. This project has never been drilled before, so you know, we're hoping that we're going to be able to prove this up, and you know, based on what we've been seeing at surface, we are very confident in the drilling program.
So just some questions that popped into my head here about the project. So this is basically the company's flagship. It's the company's sole focus. You stake this, you know, yourself. Is that correct?
No, we had to do many different transactions to
Oh yeah.
put it
So
together.
you
Yeah.
compile the property package from multiple prospectors.
Yes. Yeah. We had to. Usually prospectors own one or two showings, but we really kind of set out that if we're going to take this on, we need to control the district scale. The you know the We need to control the entire ophiolite body that we have in this area, to be, because we don't know, we know a lot more now than when we started. Now we're figuring out where the best pockets are going to be. And when I say a pocket, I mean, you're talking significant volumes. You know, it's hard to comprehend when you're looking at projects how big 30 kilometers is.
Oh
But
yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing for a
yeah,
tiny junior to have such a big property package and such a big scale target. So just going back into how the property got put together. So when you acquired the different pieces from the different prospectors, did you pay them in shares? Did you pay them in cash?
yeah, every deal was different. We were able to get a couple of key pieces doing cash and share payments. And then we did one larger share transaction where we just 100% purchased outright, 100% up front for the majority of the package to put it all together. So um, there's very minimal remaining share payments due over the next few years, and relatively minimal cash payments due over the next few years, to amount to a few $100,000 and a few million shares to outright own 100% of the entire district.
Okay. And those share payments that have been made, are those shares all free trading, or do they vest, you know, like in tranches?
The bulk of them are actually escrowed for a 3-year period, so we didn't want to, put too much pressure on the company, and allow us to have that opportunity to go out and prove out the scale and the potential of this project. So yeah, the majority of them are actually staged out, so there is no large overhang sitting in the market.
Okay. And then final question about putting the property together. So is it owned 100% right now by FAN, or is there anything that might be less than 100%? And are there any royalties on the project?
Yeah, there's some royalties staged throughout, because this was a project that we put together with many different prospectors and groups. But they're not large. I think they can all be bought down to 0.5% to 1%. And everything is owned or has the ability to be 100% owned. So there's no partial
I see.
ownership where we go into a joint venture or anything like that. With the majority of the project is 100% owned currently. There are some pieces within the project that we have to hit some milestones with cash and share issuances to earn 100%, but that is all very clearly laid out, and there's nothing that could prevent us from completing the 100% acquisition.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So looking at this slide, and this is the thing that really, I guess, turned me on to it, I would say, would be this slide, because the magnetic anomaly is so significant and so strong. I mean, it's compelling. And the fact that you own the whole thing, you basically own the whole anomaly, um, really got me interested. So tell me about why this, because we see junior miners put out IP surveys and these anomalies all the time. It's like every project has some pink blob at depth that needs to be drilled. Why is this magnetic anomaly so important?
Well, you can go maybe flip over to a different image of the same anomaly here. It really comes down to the amount of nickel that we're seeing in the anomaly. So a lot of projects are based on geophysical targets. This is, no different. What is different is that we have surface conformation in, many areas stretching across the 30-kilometer trend where we have gone and we know what is causing that magnetic signature. We know that it is related to highly elevated nickel values in soils and outcrops and tills. So stretched out across the entire surface area, 30 kilometers, we have, kind of screaming target that we want to go and test. So that's, where we're at now is that next phase where we're going and we're actually putting in drill holes. So this is, something that the market seems to want and really won't give you a lot of appreciation until you get what you're, the material that you're looking for in a drill hole. Having it at surface for, I'm a very technically focused guy, I understand, all the processes needed to get to a drilling phase, and having confirmation in outcrop of something that's explaining what this anomaly is in a good way and saying, yeah, like this is a positive confirmation that, this large magnetic anomaly is associated with these, this high nickel content. So having that in outcrop is to me already, a significant discovery, but getting that into, into the more, into the market and into the average kind of person's perception of what a discovery is, it really has to be in a drill hole. So that's, that's why we're pushing forward here and to get, to go and prove that this mineral is large and consistent over, over kilometers.
So to be clear, the magnetic survey correlates with Awaruite in outcrop at surface, and the Awaruite obviously is nickel. I mean, it's basically 70% nickel, right? And sometimes you can even see it with the naked eye, right? You can see it in this host rock. You can see the specks, and it's quite visible.
Absolutely, yeah. So the magnetic anomaly is essentially related to the ultramafic, a very large chunk of the highly magnetic, highly iron rich and nickel rich Earth's crust, essentially mantle type material, and that is a 1-to-1 correlation. So this goes back to when I was drilling out an iron ore resource, it was very similar. You have these very large scale features that you can tie together over very large areas. And because of that, you can drill, your spacing can be several hundred meters instead of, tens of meters or hundreds of meters. We're talking like we can tie together a large volume of material by drilling, very few holes spaced out over a large area. And because of the scale and because of the consistency, we have the ability to tie those zones together to essentially fast track to the resource stage, which is that is the ultimate goal here, is for us to be able to prove out not just the mineralization style but the scale, and put tonnage together, enough tonnage together that it's gonna attract a lot of attention. And it's we've already been receiving some significant interest from some large strategic players that have already taken 10% of our company, and they're interested because of the unique mineralization, the unique processing, the fact that it doesn't need to be smelted, that there is, that can cut out 30% of the costs in the supply chain just by having something that can be concentrated to a 60% nickel concentrate on site. in a very clean, environmentally friendly way. So when we start to build out the tonnages and prove that this is a project of significant merit, that is going to, that's going to be a stage where we can attract a lot more strategic investment and maybe even increase our current strategic investor to a point where we can disclose them. Right now, they're sitting at 9.9%. They're a large entity and wish to remain undisclosed at this time, but they're also providing us with the opportunity to prove out this project, and they're a very good supporter. And if we do start to build that tonnage, I think that they will maybe stamp their name on it and come in and be a larger supportive shareholder.
Okay, and so the drill program, you just put out news this morning. It's underway. The rig is turning. So let's talk about the drill program, because you made an important point, and this drill target and this drill program is about as compelling as it gets in the junior mining sector. Market cap's under 20 million. It seems to me like it's higher probability than a typical drill program. That magnetic anomaly is very significant, and you have a lot of evidence at surface. There's a lot of data that supports the same thesis that you're now going to prove through the drill program. So how big is a drill program going to be? How many holes? How many meters? And can you talk about some of the targets that you'll be testing, along this full strike extent?
Yeah, so the drill program was fully funded. We're planning 3,000 to 5,000 meters, and the initial phase of the program is really the discovery phase. So we're testing multiple zones that are spaced over 10, 15 kilometers, and the purpose is to try and identify which of these large scale areas is the best, right? So the initial phase is to go into each one and drill a couple holes. We're talking maybe 10 holes total, but they're going to be 300 to 400 meter type holes, because what we're looking for is, of course, a very large scale. And that's not to say that we couldn't drill deeper. It's what is going to give us the best bang for our dollar, our exploration dollar, and drilling into a large scale system where we know that we can have consistent mineralization. We can already start to conceive potential pits for where we can build our resource. So drilling too deep beyond that hypothetical pit that we'd start to build around this mineralization wouldn't give us good value. So after we do this initial drilling, we're going to focus on which one of these large scale areas are going to be providing us with the best potential to build that size, with the best grades that give us the ability to have the best recoveries. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just simply let's go and throw holes here and there. We have to be very methodical about how we approach it, and make sure that the dollars that we're spending on exploration are going to give us the longest term value. I just flipped over another page here. I don't know if you can still see it.
Yeah.
This one was something that we were talking about earlier. This is just the scale of the project, and that being that magnetic anomaly. Obviously, the magnetic is directly related to the ultramafic, and then within this ultramafic body, there's areas where we're going to have large scale pockets within that 30-kilometer trend that are on a scale of kilometers. And having something on the scale of kilometers is enough volume to give you billions of tons, right? So billions of tons gives you potential to have billions of pounds of nickel. So just doing a direct comparison to other projects like Canada Nickel or FPX, which is very closely related to our project and is actually related in many other ways, including one of the founders of FPX Nickel has now joined our team and sees a lot of similarities between their deposit, which is now pegged at over 10 billion pounds contained. He sees a lot of similarities to what we're finding at surface prior to drilling. and seeing that kind of potential on our project as well. So he's, very actively engaged in helping us progress this forward, and part of the drilling program and targeting and kind of laying out that methodology to be able to get there. But as you can see, the pure scale of the anomaly that we have is more than enough to put together the kinds of tonnages and contained resources that these other companies have been able to achieve. So we see ourselves as being in that category, or if not bigger, based on just the pure scale of it.
I think this is an excellent slide too. So just to put into perspective, Crawford is held by a company with a $200 million market cap, and Baptiste is held by a company with I don't know, 110 million market cap or something. And both of those companies, both CNC and FPX, have big investments from major mining companies and battery makers like Sumitomo, Samsung. They have pretty strong validation on both of those deposits, that big companies, like multi-billion market cap companies, have made investments to take 10% or 20% stakes in both of those companies. And the size of the ore bodies, I mean, 21 billion pounds, 10 billion pounds, I mean, gargantuan. I mean, those are enormous. And, the price of nickel, I don't know, whatever it is, $7.75 a pound right now. You can do the math in terms of, the in situ, value there. That's a lot of nickel. And then you can, looking at the footprint, the signature of the ore body in terms of magnetic intensity, well, FAN matches up pretty well to both of those guys. And you're sitting at whatever, I haven't looked today, but whatever, 7 million market cap. So this drill program is pretty important because, as you said, it's like you can show, rocks and outcrop. You can show IP surveys, magnetic surveys, gravity surveys, all you want. And yeah, sure, the professionals are going to understand the context of all that information, but until you actually drill and show assays, lab certified assays for drill holes, pretty much it's a yawn. And you're not going to get $100 million valuation with rock samples or soil samples. You got to actually drill. So the company is at a major potential inflection point. And just let's talk about the grades. So what sort of grades are you expecting in this phase 1 program?
Yeah, we're expecting to see similar grades to what we have on surface. So anything above 0.2% nickel would be what we would consider significant on such a large scale.
So 300 to 400 meter holes, roughly 10 holes. And are your expectations like we're going to hit 300 meters of 0.2% in every hole, or are your expectations like if we get if we get a few holes with over 100 meters averaging 0.2%, that would be a really good result?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. Obviously, we're at an early stage exploration stage. You can't expect every hole to hit. I would say a considerable number of these holes should have hundreds of meters above 0.2% nickel. That's what we're expecting based on our targeting, based on the geology, based on the geophysics and geochemistry work that we've done. So yeah, we're expecting to be able to show that we're getting multiple hundreds of meters above 0.2, where we're going to be able to recover the nickel efficiently.
Okay, yeah, and that's also important. So you're gonna drill these holes. You're going to process the core, send it to the lab for assay. I also imagine you're going to do some metallurgical testing on this core. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the kind of our mindset to fast track this project, to be able to accelerate this as quickly as possible, to get the kind of attention and credit that I think this project deserves, is to very quickly go into the metallurgical stage and actually start to do that test work. And a lot of that groundwork has been done previously, so we can go back to these companies who have already done pilot scale testing on the similar type of mineralization, and we can take our material that we're generating from this drilling program, and we can start to put it through that same processing and essentially get to a stage where we can show that we have the ability to produce a concentrate. And once we can show that ability, I think that is really a game changer for the company, to show that this material can be processed in such a way where you can end up with a high grade nickel concentrate that can go straight into the supply chain to the end user, avoiding the smelting, avoiding the global shipping routes that the material has to go through. This is something that we want to get to right away. We don't want to wait around. As soon as we have the ability to put together large enough samples, which we think we can do in this initial drilling program, we're going to start to do that metallurgical work to really prove another theory that we believe is true on this project, to show it on paper, to show it with the lab results and reports. That's what's going to give this significant amount of increased value.
So at the end of this phase 1 program, there is the potential, and I emphasize potential, of confirmation of the discovery of a substantial ore body, and then the metallurgical confirmation that potentially this could be processed pretty simply, that it may not be a very complicated processing flow sheet to actually turn this into the nickel that Tesla needs, for example, right? So it's quite, and I want to emphasize that, like, this is a substantial inflection point for the company. This is a company that's been a tiny junior, way under the radar. Nobody knows what the hell Awaruite is or why it matters. You've been working to compile this property package, to put it together, to assemble it in a cohesive manner, and that's what you've done. And now it's game time. Like, it's literally like the pads are on, the helmet is on, and you're walking out of the tunnel to play the football game. And we'll see what the score turns out to be, and those are the assays and the results from the met testing. I want to ask you a few more questions, then we'll wrap up, because it's already been quite a lengthy conversation here, Adrian. Obviously, I like the Super Gulp Zone. I made it known that I really like that name, and I like the fact it's right in the middle of this big trend. And it's kind of fatter there in the middle. Is Super Gulp going to get drilled here in this phase 1?
Yeah, we're planning on drilling several of the zones. Obviously, we have to adapt as we go. When we drill into an area, we're very flexible, and we take in the information in real time, and we actually adapt to it and adjust our plan as we go. But the Super Gulp Zone, the RPM Zone, the Gulp Zone, the Pipestone Zone, potentially the Chrome Pond Zone, are all these zones that are on the initial docket as high priority targets. And we'd like to see the majority of those drilled. Obviously, the Super Gulp and the RPM Zone are some of the more recent discoveries that we've had in this last phase of surface work. And then the Atlantic Zone is also another zone that's actually has the historic drilling that really opened up the whole kind of Pandora's chest on this project. So I would say Super Gulp is definitely one of the top on the list, and RPM is where we really like what we're seeing as well.
Okay, and then two of the hardest questions for a junior mining CEO. So think carefully before you answer them, and then we'll call it a day for this first conversation. How long will this drill program take, roughly? When will it be completed? And then sort of what's the rough timeline for when investors could start to see the results come back from the assay lab?
Yeah, no, it's I don't think they're too tough. Those are those are honest questions, and we're open and transparent about what we're doing. It's we're planning this initial phase to drill into mid-November. So at least another month or so of drilling. And that's enough time to be able to test the multiple zones and try and determine which zone is really worthy of that secondary follow-up and the kind of the initiation of that resource building phase. If we can't get there in this phase, it would be the second phase would be a time when it would be achievable to get to a resource in this style of very consistent large scale mineralization. Like I said, it doesn't take a lot of drilling to be able to build tonnages and kind of tie together zones over large areas. As far as results, one of the unique things about this mineralization is that it is visible. You can see the Awaruite in the rock. So that is something that we can potentially start to talk about as we go. As far as actual assays, the turnaround time is a few months once the drilling started. So it's not an immediate thing, but there will be updates and kind of observations and more interpretations leading up to results, which laboratory results should be in a few months.
Okay, so maybe around the new year, or maybe like just after the new year, but you plan to update the market as the drill program evolves. Okay, perfect. And then I guess the final question, what are the company's funding needs, let's say, over the next year, you think?
Yeah, it's always an interesting kind of dynamic in the junior mining space right now. As I said, this current program is fully funded. That should get us through to the new year, maybe even fund some follow-up work. But we would need to get to that resource stage if we can't do it in this first phase on the back of the results and confirmation of a zone of that's worthy of drilling out into a resource. That's when we would look to go back in a big way to finance essentially to take it to a resource stage.
All right, thank you. First conversation with the CEO of First Atlantic, Nickel. Thank you, Adrian. I really appreciate
Appreciate
this.
it.
I learned a lot. Cheers.